Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, the president of Dale, Carnegie Training, Tokyo, Japan. And my special guest today is an old friend of mine, Arthur Mitchell, who is senior advisor at White & Case. And we're in the beautiful quarters here of White & Case next to Tokyo Station. Arthur, thank you very much. So you've been here quite a number of years in Japan. Just take us back a little bit through how it was that you became to be working in the law in Japan. Why weren't you still in New York all those years ago? What brought you to Japan and how long have you been here?
Sure. Well, I've been in Japan for about 54 years, off and on.
54. I'm only 36, so it's mere nothing compared to you. Wow, that's amazing.
But I came when I was 14, actually, the first time, for a short trip with my father who liked to travel. Mm-hmm. And then I came back again when I was about 17. Mm-hmm. And then when it came time to study abroad in a junior year of college, I chose Tokyo. So
you did your junior year here?
Yes.
Where did you go?
International Christian University.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right.
So I studied Japanese politics for a year there, and then I liked it so well I decided to stay for an extra year. So,
okay.
So basically I spent 2 years, and that's when I spent a good bit of time learning Japanese. Mm-hmm. And then I went back and then graduated from college at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and then went to law school at Harvard Law School.
And where did you go to law school?
Harvard Law School.
You went to Harvard. Very nice. Very
in
nice.
1973.
1973, class of 73.
Right.
And so what happens after that? You get into the law in the States?
Well, the way it works in America is that after your second year in law school, you work in a summer, with a law firm, and then if you're lucky, they hire you. And then you come back after graduation, but I decided that I didn't want to work for a while, so I received a fellowship from the Japanese government to study Japanese law. So then I went to Kyoto University for about a year and a half.
That was very adventurous in those days, back in the 70s, you know, going off to Kyoto, being in Japan, studying Japanese law. I mean, Japan wasn't really a force economically speaking in those days.
Well, it was. It really was, certainly in Asia. And, China was not the big force that it was.
China was not there yet. No,
but Japan very much was. It was just before they were, the run-up to
the bubble.
The bubble.
85 and the Plaza Accord, and away we go, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's what I did. And then I went back to New York. I started working in New York for a couple of years, and then I was sent back here again.
Oh, the firm sent you here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And did you choose the firm on the basis that they had an operation in Japan? Or
yes, very much. Very much. At a pretty young age, I realized that I wanted to do something with law and do something internationally. Mm-hmm. My father was a doctor, and I didn't want to become a doctor because I thought that you had to spend a lot of time working with things that were not so pleasant.
Yeah, and they don't get any holidays either because they've got patients to take care of.
No, but in his case, though, he would take off time, and that's why we traveled so much.
Okay.
Anyway, so I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, and so it made sense to combine these things.
Yeah.
So international relations, politics, law, Japan.
Right, nice. And so what age were you when you got back here at that time?
After law school, I mean, it was about 25.
But 25 when you got back to Japan to work?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, so that means you were working for...
Oh, I'm sorry, let me take that back. When I came back to study, I was 25.
25, okay, but came back to work, you were...
I came back to work, I think it was about 27.
27, right? So, okay. So you didn't really spend a lot of time in New York.
No, 2 years, just 2 years.
Just 2 years, right?
Yeah,
and then back here.
And then back here.
And do they had their own office here, or they had a representative?
Yeah, well, at the time, foreign lawyers were not allowed to practice in Japan.
Right.
So I worked as a trainee with a Japanese law firm that was an associate of our law firm in New York.
Right.
And so I worked there for about 5.5 years, doing mostly ship finance.
Ship finance?
Ship finance, and a little bit of aircraft.
Right.
But it was all oriented around finance.
Mm-hmm. There can't have been too many foreign lawyers in Japan at that time.
No, there weren't too many. It's hard to say what the number was. I suspect it was around maybe 50 or so. There were some that had stayed after World War II.
Been here forever, yeah.
They had been here at least after World War II. Yeah. And then I might have been the second generation after that.
Coming through.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so what happens then? You don't stay in Japan all the time. I seem to recall you went back again to the States.
Yeah, and then after spending 5.5 years, I went back to New York, and then I worked at a firm in New York for about 14 years or so.
I remember you gave a great talk on understanding President Trump, because you'd worked with a lot of New York real estate moguls,
Right.
and how they negotiated. You gave a great talk on his negotiating tactics. I remember that talk was excellent, because you'd seen that up close and personal, I guess, when you were a lawyer in New York. That was a fascinating talk. So how long were you in New York this time?
Well, I think a total about 20 years, actually.
Right, okay.
Before going off to the Philippines, actually.
Oh, okay.
To join the Asian Development Bank as general counsel.
Ah, okay.
So during that period in New York, I did mostly real estate finance, and that's how I met many of the people who were involved in real estate in New York at the time. New York and all around the country, really.
Donald Trump wasn't one of them?
I didn't meet him. I was on the other side of a deal with him, but it was a very small deal, and I never met him.
No, right. No. Okay. And how long were you in the Philippines?
Almost 5 years.
Oh, okay. Quite a while. Yeah. And then when did you get back here?
That was a little bit over 14 years ago.
Okay.
So, so I came directly from the Philippines here to Tokyo, and I've been working at White & Case for, again, over 14 years now.
Did you join White & Case here? Or
Yes,
you already,
here.
Oh, okay, so you joined them here. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Right.
here.
So, in your time in Japan, I mean, you're in a law firm, so most of us have no idea how law firms lead people. Actually, I mean, my imagination is you're all in cubicles or you're in your offices, and you're all beaving away on your own stuff, and there's probably not a lot of leading going on or interaction, but there has to be some leading going on.
Oh, sure. No, I think in reality we work in small teams.
Right, okay.
Usually within a practice group, so a finance group or an M&A group or litigation group, as an example. And then the senior lawyers really work with younger lawyers, again, in a group, usually 2 or 3. And it varies. The team, if you will, varies depending upon the matter that's being handled. So there's quite a bit of teamwork involved.
Okay. Well, then let's talk about that a little bit. When you're, or in your experience, either for yourself or having been led by others or mentored by others, if you think about what did you notice was a bit challenging about leading a team in Japan? Because I presume most of the team here are Japanese lawyers.
It's in our case, it was about half and half. Half foreign lawyers, half Japanese lawyers, bengoshi. Now we're quite international in a way. So we have foreign lawyers from the UK, from Australia, from the US, Canada. And then we have bengoshi. Okay. So Japan has a civil law system, whereas those other countries have a common law system. And so the approach, as a general matter, is a little bit different. However, I think in terms of business today, at least in a commercial firm like this, there's really not all that much difference in the approach. Anymore. The training is a little bit different, I think. But once you spend time in practice, the differences kind of melt away.
So what was challenging for you when you started leading here?
Well, I think getting practical answers, that's always been, I think, a challenge in Japan, although I think that's changed quite a bit. In other words, client problems are not just about what the statute says, what does the law say. The question is, what is the problem that the client has, and how do you provide a solution? And again, I think all of our lawyers now, know that that's the purpose for being here in our approach. But at some points, it's been an issue in the past. So
when you're sort of coming from a more holistic solution approach to client issues, whereas your Japanese colleagues may have had a more legalistic, narrow-band. Well,
I would say looking at there's something called the Roppo Zensho, this is also, by the way, not unlike France or England. I'm sorry, France or Germany, which also has the same
civil
sort of
law system,
civil law system. Yeah. So basically the answers to all the problems are supposed to be written down. That's the basic philosophy. Now, business evolves, changes, business methods. So the book doesn't have all the answers. So that's why the approach of problem solving traditionally, again, this is by tradition, is quite different. But I think we've been very successful here, and many other, I think, international firms, in melding those two so that you get to the right solution for a client.
In terms of leading people, if we think about the challenges of leading people, apart from that type of ideological approach is not the right word, but say that tactical approach to how you're looking at things, in terms of the human dimension, in terms of what did you find was different about leading lawyers in Japan?
Yeah, well, I can recall a challenge that I had many years ago, which I think is perhaps instructive. Around the year, I used to travel, when I was in New York, I would travel back to Japan quite often, maybe sometimes 4 or 5 times a year. And around the year, in the late 90s, 1998, 1999, it was a period of time when hostile takeovers were feared in Japan. Many companies felt that they were under attack from foreign forces, if you will, right? And so the legal community thought that, it would really be nice to have a poison pill.
Yeah.
Okay. So in my travels here at the time, I was told, well, we'd like to have that kind of thing, but it just can't be done under existing law. And right about the same time, though, the law, and by the way, things change in Japan all the time. The law changes really all the time. Not necessarily dramatically, but incrementally it really does. So a stock option, a shinkabu yoyaken device was adopted to give people the ability to buy an option or to be awarded an option to buy a security. Okay? And that was a new innovation in Japan at the time. Well, that turns out to be the key thing that's needed to make a poison pill work. Okay. So even though all of my colleagues here in Japan were saying, no, you can't do it, I thought, well, wait a minute. Now that you have the option vehicle, the Shinkabu Yoyaken, maybe there is a way. So I was still working in New York, but I had 3 Japanese lawyers working for me. And so we could sit in the room and we dissected every element of the American poison pill. That's where it was invented. And so we looked at how everything worked under Japanese law. In other words, dissect the American pill, but how does that element work in Japan? And then we came up with a solution, and so we invented the Japanese version of the poison pill.
So you invented the Japanese version of the poison pill?
I did.
Hey, we've got a bit of history here. This is great.
Right.
Okay.
Now, it's kind of interesting that has some resonance even today, in the SBI case.
With Shinsei.
Shinsei was considering adopting the pill. They wound up not doing it. But the really interesting thing was that the ISS and Glass Lewis, they both came out favoring adoption of the pill on the argument that it would help raise the price for minority shareholders. So anyway, this even though poison pills haven't been very popular these days, because in some senses, under some circumstances, they may entrench management, which certainly activists don't want, and many institutional shareholders don't want either. So it's still playing out. So that's the interesting part.
Good. And in that sense, did you have much problem convincing the Japanese end here that this could actually work?
Yeah, well, it took quite a bit of convincing, actually, because it was new. And, I think people in general are rather resistant to new things, but that's innovation. And I think it's, if you stick with it, you can convince people of things here and to be innovative. find new ways to solve old problems.
Because that's actually, when I talk to a lot of business people, I'm doing these interviews, as you know, often that comes up, that the risk aversion aspect of Japanese culture, no defects, no error type of mentality.
Right.
It's very hard to get people to take on. Something has some element of risk or change attached to it. And by definition, any change is risky, right? By definition, right? So how have you found things that work to actually help people to really embrace change and accept the risk that comes with that change?
Right. Yeah, well, I think the risk aversion comes out of the manufacturing milieu you have here. In other words, you don't want to have defective products, right? No. And the comparison that one could make with American manufacturing some years ago was, a certain level of defects is natural. We just accept that, and we'll see how it goes. Whereas Japan spent quite a bit of time in trying to
zero
defects. Yeah, actually zero defects. Having said that, 70% or so of the Japanese economy now is services, where you don't have that kind of problem. And my real sense is that some very innovative things are going on here. That people innovation happens because of trial and error, and we see, and I think all of us see young folks not necessarily trying to join the government or some of the biggest companies, and having a little bit more of an entrepreneurial take. So that's something I see now. And then also I would say, as you know, I serve on the board of 2 public companies. And I see them very much thinking, the top people, thinking about digital transformation in a very serious way. So I think Japan, maybe it's not by comparison, maybe as entrepreneurial, but I wouldn't say that risks are absolutely not taken. No, people reasonable,
What about inside the firm too? I mean, if you're talking
law
about,
firm?
I don't know. My assumption is that law firms are very conservative and very risk averse. And if you put that law firm in Japan, it's going to be like super risk averse. Is it difficult to get change in a law firm?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of change you mean. Okay. So I think I think it's good that the law usually follows technological change. If the law gets a little bit too ahead of technological change, it's going to impede innovation. That doesn't mean that all innovation is good. Some innovation is good, some is not so good. So you do want to foster change in, let's say, regulation to meet the current needs of society, right? And so things, I think, the law will change, slowly, but I think at least the people that I work with, try to adapt the current legal framework to whatever the problem happens to be. So I don't see lawyers being completely risk averse. It's a question when you advise a client, you want to in fact say, here are the risks as a business matter. What are you willing to take? Now, we're not going to advise you to do anything that's illegal. That we really won't let you do.
Glad to hear that.
But when there is room, for an interpretation that's not unreasonable, I think we would go for that.
And you talk about working in small teams. I guess these teams move because you've got different matters, and so you need different expertise and different experience to come together. Right. What have you found that works well to get engagement in these small teams?
Well, that's a big problem with COVID, for example. And so many people up to now have been working from home. And so when you have a complex problem, it's really best to sit in a conference room like this, maybe use the whiteboard, spend a couple of hours, working through it, debating it, going back and forth. That's really difficult, I think, when we're doing that remotely, if it's that kind of problem. Also, I found that we've had or I have participated in some online board meetings. That's also very difficult because it's hard to read the room, right?
Read that little tiny little tiny shot on,
Right.
on the Zoom screen there.
And so much, and you're in communication, right?
Yeah.
So much of communication is trying to find the nuances and also the timing and what you know about the other person and how the group dynamics are working, right? So remote I think is very difficult, although we've overcome it. We learned how to do it, I think. But I think that's still a challenge.
And in terms of, as a team, what have you found works well to come up with creative ideas around solving problems? Because, you've got the legal aspects of things, which is, civil law, it's fairly by the manual, but as you say, it doesn't really answer. So you've got to have some creative thinking around, okay, how can we come up with an answer here which doesn't break the law but solves a problem? How do you go about how do you get creative ideas to come out? Or is just the dominant senior person the source and sole source of all the creative ideas and everyone else just listens, which is very typical in a hierarchical society like Japan? Or, because often people at the bottom may have very good creative ideas because they're young or looking inexperienced, they may be just disregarded. How have you found works to get people involved?
I'm trying to think of an example for you, if you give me a second.
Yeah, you can take your time.
Because I think a concrete example would be the best way to illustrate that. Well, let me give you a few examples of some things that I've been doing personally and that I think are creative and that where I've received quite a bit of help from others here in the office, some of the younger folks and some of the partners as well. So in this period of time, it's very, with COVID, there were times when we're not able to go and see clients and not have an actual engagement with them. So we were pushing out things through web. We used to do seminars, and now we do webinars, right? But with very little direct contact with the client, it's a little bit hard to understand what their current problems are, right? So we've come up with a tool, if you will. I'm calling it a dashboard, if you will, where we will follow from public information what clients are doing and in a way anticipate where they're likely to go in terms of their next investment, and also many law firms get RFPs, a request for proposal. Well, what if you can, in advance, more or less figure out where they're going to be going in terms of an investment?
Skate to where the puck is going to be.
That's right.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now.
So with some colleagues here, we have developed such a dashboard.
Right. So this is coming from you?
This is coming from me. That came from me. That came from me. But
how do you get, that's one of the issues around leadership is often as leaders, we tend to be driving the machine, right? And we tend to be directing the direction of the machine as well. So it's our ideas, it's our direction. But what have you found works about getting ideas from the most junior inexperienced people? Because often, depending on the case, it may be a consumer product, or it might be something that a generational aspect that they probably have a much better aspect on that than someone in our age bracket would have. So
okay.
how do you find getting ideas out of the bottom, I guess, is my question.
I can give you a really good example there.
Good.
Okay,
Please
because
do.
I am not a digital native.
No.
Right?
Me too.
Yet, I think technology-related issues are just the most important issues of our time, and will continue to be. I think artificial intelligence, much like electricity, will come to be part of everything, every product, every service. So on many of the sort of technical issues with tech, I rely on some of the younger lawyers to give me ideas about how things actually work. So I'm very interested in virtual reality and gamification, and these have, there are plenty of legal issues related to these things. Smart cities, for example, involve IoT, right, Internet of Things, cybersecurity, privacy, data management, and all these things where the law is evolving, for example, but there are also some really technical parts as well. Oh, and by the way, in my own case, I rely on lots of people outside the firm as well, young people outside the firm. I have young friends who are in tech that I have dialogue with, and so that gives me, I think you can't, in this day and age, you cannot just rely on your own organization. You have to reach out to people where the knowledge is, and there's a lot of knowledge out there.
Okay, that's a good point, actually, because often we get stuck, I think, inside our own dimension, and we think that's the only resource we've got available to us. Trust is a big factor in Japan. I always think to myself, if you're not engaged, you don't care about the better mousetrap sort of problem, right? You don't care. So you've got to be engaged. If you're engaged, then you've got an aspect to be creative. But there's also an element of trust in there too, in terms of how the firm treats you, how your boss treats you. How free do you think you are to express your opinions? How free you are to come up with ideas. So, what has been your experience with things that really work well in building trust?
I can give you some concrete examples there, again, from my experience as an outside director.
Okay.
When you come from outside, you are outside.
You're
right?
outside.
So you, in order to be part of the organization in the right way, you have to be trusted. So how do you do that? Well, you have to convey. First of all, you have to listen. Of course, listen to people and try to understand what their goals are, what their values are, right? And then, to some extent, show that you're aligned with that. Because if it looks like you're just coming in to throw fire bombs, then he won't be trusted, right? And why should I want to be trusted? Well, it's because spending time there, I'd like to have influence, and without trust, you're not going to have any influence.
Exactly.
In fact, you're going to be, eventually shown the door. Right. So I think trust is sort of that's a universal sort of thing.
So how do you build a trust? Okay, we accept it's like apple pie and motherhood. We accept that trust is important, but what have you found works in terms of building trust with others? How do you build trust in those boards? How do you build trust in the teams here?
Yeah, well, I think by showing that you sincerely want to make a contribution, and by you're dealing with people, number one. So let's say you disagree with somebody. Well, how do you express your disagreement? Do you do it by, Greg, you're an idiot. What you just said is terrible. Is that the way I express my disagreement with your position? Or do I say, I see where you're going with that, Greg, but what if you think about it in this way? That's just it's the same message, if you will, but delivered differently. Right. I think that's at least that's the way I do it.
And, in that sense, I mean, the hierarchical nature of Japanese society is such that, people will do as they're told. And so you get a sort of compliance aspect of they do what they're told, but that sort of go the extra mile, that internal intrinsic motivation to really, shoot the lights out. That's coming from other areas. And I think trust is one of those elements where when people do feel trusted, they feel safe to try harder, to go harder. So, apart from just that communication piece you mentioned in that example, have you found any other things that sort of stimulate through that building trust, to stimulate people's enthusiasm for the task?
Yeah, one of the issues I'm working on lately is sustainability governance. Okay, so sustainability is something that is in the air these days. We see this completely; it's everywhere, and it's here to stay for a while too, for a long while too, because it's very basic to our businesses, our lives, these things, right? So combining concepts of sustainability with governance is very important. So in a corporation now, how do you do that? There will be requirements. As an example, next year, if you want to join the prime section of the Japan Stock Exchange, the listing requirements through the corporate governance code, of course, though, require that you disclose ESG metrics. All right. Well.
What if you don't have any ESG metrics? You're in big trouble. Right?
Well, you won't be on the prime section.
Board,
You won't be. You'll be in the middle kind of section. In any case, people are struggling with, well, how do we actually do this? It's rather new, right? And a friend was telling me about OKR, objectives, key results.
Okay, objectives and key results, as opposed to key.
KPIs. You can use KPIs you can use KPIs as well.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the tool. These are just tools that people use. Okay. So just last week, I visited a company that is employing OKR, so objectives, key results. And what that means is that there's a lot of communication, both upward and downward, and at all levels, right? So top level management, if you will, down to the middle level, then down to a group, let's say, and then to individuals. And so there's also upward feedback. The top people set the vision, the objectives, and then everyone in the organization is asked to try to see what kind of contribution they can make, and it's self-generated, right? And it's an iterative process, as far as I can understand. So I think that may be the way to bring sustainability into the entire company. If it's just top down, you must do this, you must do that. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. So we'll see.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't come across that OKR before. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And in terms of if you were thinking about giving some advice to someone who is going to be sent to Japan to run an organisation here,
right.
So what's some helpful advice?
Well, wait a minute. You've written the book on that.
I have written the book. That is true, and they can read my book. But let's hear your thoughts on what some advice you give them.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've heard, is that the biggest problem faced by foreign managers is explaining the situation here to the home office. So it means that you need you spend a lot of time understanding, what is the reality, the gemba, what is happening at the coalface, if you will, and then translating that, and I don't mean linguistically, but translating that for the home office and see how the goals, can mesh. I think the better companies, some companies have been here for a long, long time. They know how that works. And even if they send somebody who hasn't had much experience with Japan, they kind of the system allows them to do that. I think if the home office from abroad, if they haven't had much experience in Japan, that can be quite challenging.
Well, often the expectations are out of line with the speed of change, right?
Well, sure.
You're going over there to fix it, Arthur. Well, come on, you've been there 3 months. Nothing's happened. What's wrong with you?
Right. So there is a different time frame. But I think what I would say, though, I've heard many people, foreigners in particular, say, well, Japan never changes. That's not true. No, it does. It evolves, I think, in many ways. Sometimes the pace of change, of course, is much slower and requires more nemoashi, groundwork, talking with many, convincing, many people. On the other side of it, though, the companies that I work with understand that they're working in a global environment and that they need to speed things up. They need to speed up their changes, their decision making, their approach to the markets. I think at the top levels, that's very clearly understood. And some of these companies, we're talking about big traditional Japanese companies, they're slow to move in a sense, but also so many people have to be brought along. They have to trust management, its vision, and move accordingly. So that takes a bit of time.
Yeah, well, just the sheer numeracy involved in something like that is massive in getting people to understand where we're going and then contribute to the getting there.
I think that's where I'm not a management consultant or anything, but OKR seems to be an approach that might work because
where's OKR coming from? Is this an American idea?
Yeah, it started with Intel. Apparently, John Doerr was the one who created it. I think Google uses it, and other tech companies, but it's not just for tech companies. And there are a number of companies in Japan that are trying to implement it.
We used to have management by objectives.
Objective.
Right?
That's
what's the difference? I wonder.
No, that's top down. That's just completely top down.
Right.
Yeah, and that was. Is it not Deming?
And that goes back a long way. Was it Deming? I don't
know.
Deming, or are you thinking maybe? Who are we thinking of?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's not Deming. It's
not coming to me.
It's the other. It's the other management.
The other gurus whose names escaping me for the moment.
Yeah. So management by
Warren Buffett in my mind, but it's not Warren Buffett. It's.
We'll remember.
Come on, who is it?
We'll remember.
I'll ring up at 3:00 in the morning. And
so that's sort of sort of management techniques I think change over time. The OKR seems to be more attuned to the time now, where young people want to feel that they have an input. I think, and not just take orders. It's not this. The management by objectives and KPIs. KPIs are important to have because they measure. OKR has to be measurable because you have to have a time frame and it has to be achievable and concrete, those sorts of things. So that seems to me like a better way of, given the kind of world where we're working in a lot of uncertainty, ambiguity, those sorts of things. It's good to have everyone moving in the same direction.
So if we thought about trying to come up with a definition of leadership, Arthur, what do you think would be a reasonable definition for leadership for you?
Okay, I have thought about that a bit. Many companies in Japan go through a 3-year business plan, the Chuki Keikaku.
Yep.
That's important. That's an important tool. But I think leadership means setting a vision and deciding what the mission is. So I think the better companies, at least the top people at the better companies, they're the leaders, right? But you have leaders at all levels too, by the way. But I'm talking right now about the leaders at the top. As difficult as it is, it's really their responsibility to try to discern where their industry is going in 5 years and maybe 10 years. Because everything that you do now is related to how well you'll be able to perform 5 years or 10 years from now. So, for example, what kind of employees, who are you going to hire? What kind of person are you going to hire today? If that's a person coming right out of college, think about that person 10 years from now, right? And 10 to 15 years from now, that person's going to be at a middle level in the company, lower middle level, if you will, maybe just below manager, right? But that's the core. Those are the people that are the core to the operations. So if you've recruited very talented people, but if they don't have the basic skills that are needed 10 years from now, then you're going to be in trouble. So here's the example. So I think most large Japanese companies, they recruit from the legal department and the econ department. Well, if technology is going to become a huge part of everyone's life, perhaps you ought to recruit more people from the bunkake. I'm sorry, bunkake and nikake. From the sciences. Japan has a tremendous shortage of people, and I'm speaking as a lawyer now, of course. That's my background, but that's also the background, and you come with a mindset too. So I think in the future, leaders are going to have to have a much better understanding of where the technological developments are taking us.
Is there anything about leading in Japan, Arthur, which I haven't asked you, which I should have? Have I missed anything we could have talked about?
Leading in Japan. Well, again, I think it's a lot of listening. And indicating, leading.
Were you always, this is an interesting question, were you always a good listener?
I think so, I hope so.
But were you always like that? For example, has Japan helped you to become a better listener, or were you always a good listener?
That's right. My wife taught me how to be a
Your
good
wife
listener.
is forced listening. Yeah, my wife tells me I don't listen, so I'm probably a work in progress.
No, that's what I hear. But that means I can improve. You can improve. Yeah. No, I think that. Let's see if I can articulate this. So I think let's just take New York, working in New York as a cultural modem, if you will. I think what happens is that the way to succeed in New York is to get your ideas out there and to argue your point. Right? Take a stand and argue it. That's not how it happens here. No. That doesn't mean that people don't have ideas or don't have positions. They do. But you roll it out a little bit more slowly, right? And make sure that you're in the same mode with your listener, your listener and your listener. You're both becoming listeners, and sort of looking for. I think it's more subtle here, subtle, and it's not only the words. It's just the way things are put, how you say it. Right? So if you say things in the right way at the right time, you can lead. But if you just blast it out there, that's not going to work.
Not going to work.
I don't think. Not in Japan.
And Peter Drucker was the guy.
Peter Drucker. Peter, you're right.
We're getting stuck with Deming. With D and E.
It was Peter Drucker.
Deming, no, it's not that. It's not Drucker.
Right.
So.
And that was great for a manufacturing company at a certain period in time. But as you move to this new paradigm of service-oriented companies, and even manufacturers who are becoming more service-oriented, I think you need a different management tool.
Well, on that note, let's wind up there. Arthur, thank you very much for joining me today.
Okay, my pleasure.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Arthur. And please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.